Well, welcome. 25 years, that's a long time. Really, it's a great accomplishment. I remember when I first met with Michael and Nan when they were proposing starting Tikkun magazine at the Meat Market Coffee House in Noe Valley in San Francisco. And at that time, I had mainly known Michael as Michael and I met in 1975 in graduate school at the Wright Institute, and we were the bad boys of the Wright Institute in a way, because we were critical of the approach to psychology that treated the infant's goal as gradually separating and becoming a discrete individual. Of course, that is very important, but we wanted to keep connecting that infant back into the relationship. And so we were full of critiques in that school, and Michael and I met each other there, developed a common alignment. We'd each come in different directions out of the politics of the 1960s. Michael, a little older than I, had been more of a politico. I'd been more of a countercultural person, but I'm sure Michael feels at least as countercultural as myself, and I feel just as political as he is. And so out of that relationship, we forged a great partnership and a great friendship, and we've stuck together for these 35 years. So. And I want to start by thanking Rabbi Michael Lerner and Nan Fink-Geffen for having the courage and the moral vision and the transcendental unification of multiple aspects of reality and the determination to start Tikkun magazine. So thank you. So let me just say a few words about the origins of Tikkun and where I think we came from and what we're trying to do, what we've been trying to do. We were, in my view, in significant part, a product of the social movements of the 1960s. And those movements were magical, an incredible historical moment of an uplift of the human spirit in which people came into. Is there a feedback in this that could be turned down an inch? It sounds good. Sounds okay to you all? Okay. So the movements of the 1960s, what made them move was not only demonstrations, which was an element of the physical movement of the 1960s, but also a coming out of isolation and into an experience of social connection, in which the Vietnam War increasingly began to appear to us as a form of collective insanity and reflective of some kind of massive disconnection from reality, and in which, through the activity of meeting each other in public space and recognizing each other in an authentic way, grounding us in an experience of mutual presence and vitality and spiritual uplift, movements began to pour out of the historical time. The movements existed in many cases, but they either started or they greatly expanded. The women's movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, the gay and lesbian movement, many different kinds of movements, new institutions, new music, new efforts, all came out of what I'm describing as that upsurge of mutual recognition and affirmation. And I think, as I experienced it, I came from an upper middle class family in New York City. I was sort of predestined for some class fate as, I don't know, a big-time lawyer in New York was what my father had in mind. And I was nice, good personality, good student, but drifty inside and isolated and puzzled. I would say longing and puzzled. And the 60s did me the great service and favor of bringing me out of that state into an experience of a plenitude of community and a sudden discovery of myself and others in a new kind of relationship. That relationship, that experience, was not that well understood to us. We didn't have words for it. It was ineffable, it was beautiful, it was certainly real. It certainly was communicating some kind of truth about the universe to us that influenced the world tremendously. For all the criticisms and bashing of the 60s, the marginalization of the 60s, really nobody's been able to stop it. It continues in spite of whatever criticisms are raised, whatever reactions are put out by society. It continues to bubble outward toward creating a more humane, just, sacred, and egalitarian world. Tikkun, although it was also born out of other factors, I'm sure Michael and Nan wouldn't agree with my exact way of putting it. Judaism was a factor, 3,200 years older. The women's movement was a factor. Many things were a factor. But one thing was clear is that we didn't actually understand it, and we knew that it was a profound truth that needed to be understood. And the available ways to understand it at that historical time, if we go back to the early 1980s as we were coming out of the hot wave of the 60s, were Marxism, which was very powerful and influential to me, but was somehow not getting this element I've been describing to you. Its economic focus, its economism, its focus on the economy as an external kind of mechanism that was supposedly shaping class society and social injustice, somehow wasn't capturing the interhuman dimension that had been so revolutionary and transformative of human relationships that we had experienced. We knew the answer wasn't liberal democracy alone, even an extension of liberal democracy. Because liberal democracy, the world that we're in, and maybe extending it to make it more and more democratic, still did not capture this element of our connection to each other. It captured our rights as individual persons. It captured the rights of that differentiated infant. But it did not capture, and does not capture, this communal recognition, mutual affirmation, and mutual presence, the experience of community itself. Unfortunately, that's not in the Constitution. That's what's going to be one of these days when we create the new one, the new Tikkun Constitution. So, and psychology, as we were trying to incorporate the insights of psychology during that period in the 70s, when Freud and Marx was the big intellectual debate in the worlds that stuff like Tikkun addresses were a part of at that time. Somehow that wasn't getting it either, because the psychological and the psychoanalytic, although there were important insights there, they were too located in the family. They were too regressed back to childhood, when it was actually the total, in some way, the total energy field that was suffering from something wrong that needed to be understood, and where the transformation of that energy field was something we intuited was possible and could be written about and talked about.